Thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet Voice You Know It, the News You Trust studio, sponsored by Grain Equipment Company, where innovation meets execution. I'm Dale Menyo, powered by Soy Biodiesel. Today, I'll head to the west side of Lima for our next installment of Feeding Farmers in the Field. And on Thursday, I'll head to Salina for the latest update from Farm Credit Mid-America, and we'll talk about National Co-op Month. It is October, and it may be hard to believe given the recent warmth, but the average temperature takes quite a dive during the month. The first frost and freezes just occurred in parts of northwestern plains, and we should not be surprised to find frosty air coming through the country from now on, even if temperatures are above normal for the next few weeks. Outside of mountain areas, the median first frost dates when the low temperature for the day reaches 32 degrees Fahrenheit range from late September near the Canadian border to late October and early November near the southern end of the Corn Belt. It may take until late November or later for areas around the Gulf of Mexico. So, during October, it should come as no surprise that frost will become a regular part of weather discussions, but will this year be late? Today's weather brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Here's the forecast.
Sunny, warm, and dry over Ohio here as we move through this week. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin. Let's take a look at that Ohio forecast update. We finally are getting good sunshine around today. It's going to stick with us tomorrow and Friday. No threat of moisture the rest of this week. A minor disturbance coming out of Wisconsin and across Lake Michigan is dying out before it can throw any moisture our direction later on Friday. So I think we're going to be fully dry here through Saturday. We have a frontal boundary that moves across the Great Lakes as we hit the late Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening time frame. I think that front can trigger some scattered showers over about 50 to 60% of Ohio overnight Sunday night into early Monday. That right now is going to bring anywhere from a quarter to maybe 3/4 of an inch of precipitation. So we'll watch that. It's gone before sunrise on Monday morning. Monday turns out partly sunny in the afternoon, cooler, and we keep that cool air around into early Tuesday before moderating temperatures dramatically, and we are dry for the entirety of next week, Monday afternoon through Friday and Saturday. And I'm looking for this dry pattern to continue likely through next weekend and into early the week of the 14th. I'm seeing nothing all the way across the country at the end of next week. It is a completely dry at lower 48 here for us, and so that's the reason why I think the dry pattern can extend very, very easily. That's a look at your forecast update. I'm meteorologist Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. As we are observing from headlines, dock workers along the East and Gulf Coast ports commenced a strike due to a continued dispute over wages, the implementation of automation, and benefits. The most recent contract between the ILA and the USMX expired on September 30th. The ILA has repeatedly stated it is not willing to extend the most recent contract in order to provide additional time for negotiations. As a result, the strike began as planned on Tuesday morning at 12:01 a.m. Now, last year, this is according to Mike Steenhoek, Executive Director of Soy Transportation Coalition, last year, 54 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans were exported by bulk. 5.8 million metric tons were exported via containers. Of that 5.8 million, approximately half of that was exported via the East and Gulf Coast. The other half was primarily exported via Los Angeles and Long Beach and other West Coast ports. Therefore, we're looking at approximately 5 to 6% of total soybean exports that will be impacted by a strike on the East and Gulf Coast. That number comes from U.S. Department of Agriculture. In addition to soybean exports, we are clearly concerned with the detrimental impact on meat exports. So many of the soybeans grown in the U.S. are ultimately fed to livestock for both the domestic and export markets. You cannot harm meat and poultry exports without harming soybean farmers. Let's check in now with Joel Panorwood with our latest SCN pest update.
Soybean cyst nematode robbing yields more than many farms might be realizing. Nick Tinsley of BASF says fall is the optimal time to be sampling for SCN.
What kind of field should I be sampling? And there's a few different schools of thought here. Let's say, for example, you've got a corn or a wheat field that will be going to soybean next year. That's a perfectly valid field to test. And the reason is it's going to give you a really good idea of the level of threat next year for that soybean crop. So that's one type of field to test. The other thing to consider is, let's say you've got a soybean field and it didn't quite yield as high as you thought it would, and you don't quite know why. Taking SCN samples in that field may allow you to understand what impact SCN had on your crop after the fact, and then plan for future years.
Those tips coming from the latest in the Amplifying Ag video series, online now at ohioagnet.com. And once we've sampled for nematodes, how do we interpret the results?
The threshold for SCN is somewhere around 500 eggs per 100 cc's of soil. Now, this is going to vary depending on where you're located and what that soil is like. So for example, a sandier soil that dries out, has multiple stresses on it, you might lower that threshold a little bit, and you might increase it a bit if you're in a really optimal type of fields.
Nick Tinsley of BASF and their latest from the Amplifying Ag video series. Again, more at ohioagnet.com. I'm Joel Norwood reporting.
And thanks, Joel. A group of 34 lawmakers from both parties and chambers in Congress representing southeastern states wrote a letter Tuesday to congressional leaders to work with the Biden administration to provide disaster aid to agricultural producers following Hurricane Helene. USDA and other federal agencies are encouraging farmers and livestock producers affected by floods and other destruction from hurricanes to apply for aid. Members of Congress also want a disaster package for farmers. The letter comes after President Joe Biden indicated Monday that Congress will likely need to pass a supplemental disaster package to deal with the response to the historic hurricane. To prevent deep and lasting economic damage to the agricultural industry in the southeastern United States, it is imperative that Congress make appropriations as soon as possible upon the completion of damage assessments to fully fund unmet agricultural disaster relief needs in these states and across the nation, the lawmakers wrote. Farmers and growers nationwide, not only those damaged by Helene, have now faced multiple growing seasons without sufficient federal support. Federal Emergency Management Agency officials said there are about 3,500 federal employees on the ground in the storm-damaged areas, providing everything from rescue assistance to helping deal with food and housing needs. FEMA officials encourage people to get the word out that FEMA is available to provide assistance, said FEMA's press secretary. Engaging the losses, we are still assessing the size and impacts to agriculture and forestry. We know they are significant. Talking about agriculture impacts, farmers in states hit hardest by Hurricane Helene have roughly 20,000 crop insurance policies with about $7 billion in total liability. Some of the crops hit by the storm include corn, soybeans, cotton, peanuts, and orchids. Those policies will help producers recapture a percentage of lost income from their crops. That's only a portion of the impacts that we think agriculture will be hit by. Stay tuned. We'll take a look at markets after this.
Did you know soybeans' #1 customer is animal agriculture? That includes Ohio's beef farms. Research from the Soy Checkoff found that U.S. beef operations use over 1.3 million tons of soybean meal every year. That's the meal from about 55 million bushels of U.S. soybeans. Essential protein, energy, and amino acids. High-quality feed for heart-healthy beef. Soybeans, feeding the industry that feeds us. Brought to you by Ohio's soybean farmers and their checkoff.
Hi everyone, this is Dale Minio from the Ohio AgNet. For a quarter of a century, I powered my truck with biodiesel, traveling the state promoting agriculture. Biodiesel is a reliable, high-performance fuel that works in any diesel engine without modification. The best part is that with every mile driven, I'm fueling the economy, doing good for the environment, and supporting soybean farmers. Learn how using biodiesel can add value to every bushel of soybeans grown at soyohio.org. Before we get to the markets, let's talk about some of the prices received by farmers in Ohio in August. Some of the highlights would include August corn at $3.68 per bushel, decreased 36 cents from July and down $1.88 from last year. The August soybeans at $10.80 a bushel were down 80 cents on the month and down $3.80 from last year. The August wheat at $5.28 per bushel decreased 30 cents from last month and down 98 cents from a year ago. August milk at $24.40 per hundredweight increased $1 from last month and decreased $4.30 from a year ago. Nationally, the August prices received index basing off of 2011 as a base was at 127.9, increasing 3.8% from July and 1.8% from August. The livestock production index at 158.1 increased 3.9% from July and 18% from August last year. At 100.1, the crop production index was down 0.1% from last month and 16% from the previous year. Producers received the higher prices during August for market eggs, milk, strawberries, and peaches, but lower prices for corn, broilers, soybeans, and cotton. In addition to prices, the volume change of commodities marketed also influences the index. In August, there was increased monthly movement for cattle, grapes, broilers, and hogs. The decreased marketing we saw in wheat, corn, soybeans, and strawberries. Time now for the Louis Dreyfus Grain Analysis, brought to you by the Ohio Soybean Council and your soybean checkoff. Here's Ryan Martin.
Grain markets are working their way higher in Tuesday trade. A little bit of that was surprising. We started the day with follow-through to the upside on corn and wheat, but we saw soybeans get into the market as well because, and actually everything in the marketplace yesterday was traced back to the expanding Middle East war. Iran did reportedly launch a missile at Israel, and this is creating all sorts of concern. We saw it first in crude oil, up over $3 a barrel for a good set of the trading hours yesterday, and then we saw it spill over into some of the other marketplaces as well. Let's start with demand. We didn't get this right away, but we found out through the day 195,000 metric tons of corn and 120,000 metric tons of soybeans, both sold to unknown for 24-25 delivery. So there's some export demand in there. As the other markets got started with the geopolitical headlines, it was going back to Russia to see firming cash prices on the wheat side of things, now quoted at $222 a metric ton FOB versus $218 previously. So that pushed the wheat market up a little bit. Spot Paris milling wheat was up. Corn was up in Europe as well. The South American weather forecast is consistent in keeping central and northern Brazil mostly dry for another week to 10 days or so. But moisture is going to be expanding into southern parts of Brazil, Mato Grosso do Sul, Mato Grosso, and Goiás overall over the next little bit. Other stories out there, export demand cooling on the corn side over the past 3 to 4 weeks. Early corn yield data points to a higher national yield from USDA, but also there's evidence to support a robust physical corn export disappearance from December through February. I'm not really sure that we're going to be seeing the higher corn yields here, but it'll definitely be offset by action happening farther west. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. Today's market's brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Recapping yesterday's close, December corn up 4 1/4 at $4.29. November beans up 1/4 cent at $10.57 1/4. And July wheat up 16 at $6.37. Go to the overnight, we continue in the same direction. December corn up 3 1/4 at $4.32 1/4 cent. March up 3 1/4 at $4.49 3/4. Carry it clear to May. You're up 3 at $4.58 3/4. November soybeans up 3 3/4, trading $10.61. January $10.79 1/4 cent, up 3 3/4, and March up 3 3/4 at $10.93 1/4 cent. In wheat, we have December up 5 at $6.04. March, $6.24 3/4, up 5 1/4. And then the new crop for July is $6.42 1/4 cent, up 5 1/4. In livestock, then, October cattle $184.47, up 70. December up 37 at $185.17. The October lean hogs are $83.50, up $1.25. December was up $1.32 yesterday at $74.60. If you want out to February, you're at $78.57, up $1.20. Feeder cattle for November, $244.67, down 22. January down 32 at $238.45. Class 3 milk for November, $22.57, down 4. December's also down 4 cents at $21.47. Quick look to the rain gauge. We did get 0.08 of an inch of rain overnight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dale Minio. This is the Ohio AgNet.